Alzheimer's disease. It asks some of the deepest, most unsettling questions about who we are. It forces us to look right at the nature of our own identity, our consciousness. So today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating literary analysis of the novel Still Alice and use it as a guide to see how this disease, step by step, takes apart our sense of self. And this quote from Mohammed Sanusi, the author of the analysis we're looking at, just nails it, doesn't it? The core fear here isn't just about losing your memories. It's the terror of losing the very person you think you are, of just falling into nothing. And that really brings us to the biggest, most haunting question of all. It's a puzzle for philosophers, but for millions of people, it's terrifyingly real. I mean, if the memories that connect you to everything, your past, your present, your future, if they're just erased, what's left? Are you even the same person anymore? So how do you even begin to study something so personal? Well, this scholar had a really interesting idea. They used Lisa Genova's novel Still Alice almost like a laboratory. By following the story of a brilliant Harvard professor with early onset Alzheimer's, we get this incredibly vivid and intimate window into the existential crisis the disease kicks off. Okay, so the very first stage of this deconstruction, it's like shattering your internal map of the world. Our identity, who we are, is so deeply tied to our sense of time and space. And when that connection snaps, the self really starts to crumble. The analysis gives this a pretty academic-sounding name, chronotopic identity. Sounds complex, but the idea is actually super simple. It just means that who you are is completely tangled up with your relationship to time and space. I mean, think about it. Your home, your office, the route you take to work, these aren't just dots on a map. They are literally the building blocks of you. For Alice, this foundation just dissolves in the most devastating ways. Her daily jog, something that used to define her, suddenly becomes terrifying when she gets completely lost on a route she knows by heart. Her own home, her sanctuary, becomes a confusing maze. Her office at the university, the very place that defined her as this brilliant academic, it just becomes an alien space. Her map of the world, but the physical one and the one in her mind, is just being wiped clean. And this one question from Alice in the book, it just captures the absolute horror of it all. This isn't just about being physically lost, you know? It's an existential scream. If you're a stranger in your own house, then who on earth are you? So once your map of the world starts to crumble, what happens next? Well, the loss of place leads right into the second stage. Our identities aren't just built on space. They're made of the stories we tell ourselves. And when you can't tell your own story anymore, the self just begins to unravel. This brings us to another cool concept, narrative identity. A philosopher named Paul Ricoeur came up with this. And the idea is that we are all storytellers, right? Our identity is the story we weave together about our life, connecting our past, our present, and our hopes for the future into one coherent tale. But for Alice, Alzheimer's violently rewrites her life story. It turns her from the author into this forgotten character in her own book. The brilliant professor who was a master of language becomes this passive observer. Her own thoughts, she says, drown in what feels like black river sludge. She literally loses the ability to narrate her own life. Without a past to anchor her or any certain future to look forward to, Alice's life story just collapses. And her question here reveals the true terror of losing that narrative. It's not just about forgetting things. It's about losing the entire reason for living. And now we get to the deepest, most frightening part of this whole deconstruction. The moment the self literally no longer recognizes itself. This is that psychoexistential breakdown, right at the heart of the disease. There's this one scene in the novel that is just chilling. Alice looks at her own reflection in the mirror and sees a complete stranger staring back. The face is familiar, but the person, the her she knows, is gone. It's this moment of just profound, terrifying alienation from herself. The analysis connects this to a famous idea in psychoanalysis called the mirror stage. The idea is that as babies, we form our ego, our sense of I, by recognizing ourselves in a mirror for the first time. Well, for Alice, Alzheimer's is like that process happening in reverse. The link between her inner self and her outer image is severed, and her ego starts to just disintegrate. But here's where things get really interesting. Is the self completely gone? The analysis suggests this radical idea of an Alzheimer's identity. It's the notion that identity doesn't just vanish into a void. Instead, it transforms. The disease creates a new, altered state of being. Not an absence, but a metamorphosis. And this leads Alice, and all of us really, to one of the biggest philosophical questions you can ask. Is your self just a product of your physical brain, a bunch of neurons and proteins? Or is there some essence, maybe a soul, that can outlast the biological decay? The story forces you to stare that mind-body problem right in the face. So after this systematic breakdown of the self, we're left with one final, incredibly important question. After everything is stripped away, what is actually left? So let's just recap the journey we've been on. First, the loss of your place in the world. Then, the unraveling of your life story. And finally, the loss of even recognizing yourself. So, what could possibly survive that kind of total collapse? Well, the analysis proposes this really powerful shift in how we even define existence. You know the famous saying, I think, therefore I am? That doesn't work anymore. In its place, a new foundation for identity seems to emerge, one that's not based on thinking, but on raw emotion and sensation. I feel, therefore I am. Alice has lost her incredible mind, her memories, her whole life story. But at the very end, something elemental is still there. She can still feel the simple, pure joy of a spoonful of ice cream. She can still feel the warmth of her daughter just being in the room. Her thoughts might be gone, but feeling is still there. And that leaves us with one last profound question. If our very essence can shift from thinking to feeling, does that mean our most basic human connections can survive? When everything else fades away, what's the last thing to go? Maybe it's love.